Harry, Jack, I
Yes, Jack.
I'm kidding. We were already on the call. Um, I wanted to talk because you have been at the meeting a few times recently, and there hasn't been a lot of airtime for you. And I want to begin doing more of the kind of conversations that you and I started out doing for people to listen to, so that we can
Yes.
then talk about them when we all get together, and it may be a little more conducive to more active conversation.
Yes.
So that's my present
Well,
thinking, right or wrong. I'm going with it for the minute. So how's it been? You're back in LA. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm back in LA. Wow, it's just amazing, you know. It just uh I still I'm still trying to just for me to be here. It's just I thought I wasn't gonna come back at all,
Yeah.
and then because most of my and you were absolutely right. Whatever I had before, it didn't happen here in Southern California,
Yeah.
or in LA. It was way before that. And I know when this happened, uh, but I just didn't take care of it properly. But most of my nightmares were just here.
You were
Every time we did,
you were referring
yeah,
to the idea that the circumstances that you were facing when we first met weren't the real beginning of the struggle you were having. They just happened to be the circumstances at the time we met.
yes. So I used to have panic attacks way before that,
Yeah.
but if you go back all the way to 2000 and I think two, all the way 2002, there was an incident that happened with my brother that took. I was introduced to anxiety for the first time. I actually went to a doctor, and he prescribed me anxiety pills for anxiety.
Hmm.
That was the first time I was introduced to anxiety, panic attacks, and everything. But I know what happened. I know it was my mistake that I didn't talk to anyone except my doctor, and I just I just didn't take care of it properly for over 20 years,
Hmm.
because my mental breakdown happened in 2022.
So how old were you
Uh,
then?
oh, I think it was 17, 18. Yeah,
Yeah.
18. Yes, 18. So you so that so I took those anxiety pills for about maybe 2 months, 3 months.
Hmm.
And then back then it was just really bad. It was really bad, to be honest. Really
Hmm.
bad. I never talked to anyone about it until 2022 when this happened. Uh, 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 but 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 in the meantime, from 2002 all the way to 2022, I was having panic attacks every maybe once or twice a year, and then to me it was just normal.
Yeah.
To me, it was just no, it was just in my view of the world was just, when you I was always very anxious, always I always worry about anything,
You mean when you
anything.
when you were younger than 17?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Because I was going to
but
mention to you that those explosions don't happen from what's happening. They're an accumulation of
yes,
resisting what's happening from the beginning. And most of us, when we're infants, we're very, very impressionable and very sensitive to what's happening. We don't have the mental skill
yes,
to
and I.
deal with it.
Mhm.
So it builds up.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It built up all the way to 2022, and then to the point that I just couldn't. So what? I think I know what really happened, because before 2022, because I got my own apartment. At that time I was just living by myself. We Because my girlfriend right now, because I have a daughter with my girlfriend.
Hmm.
She's 9. And then if you listen to all my these interviews or everything, there's one person that I never mentioned,
Yeah.
and that was my daughter, because it just because she was the one who would always just keep me keep me alive. At that time, every time there was a panic attack, every time I was depressed, every time I was anxious, I would just think of my daughter, and she would just she was like my lifeguard.
Didn't you lose
But
control of her at some point during that time?
no. I just spoke with them. No, no. I actually spoke with the mom because we were not together. Because I was always with my daughter all the time,
Right.
and I told her that I wasn't feeling good, that I was anxious and depressed, and she told me you need to go, you need to go and be with your family. So that's why I went back to Chicago.
Gotcha. Yeah, I knew there was a
Yeah.
separation there, and I forget exactly what had happened.
And then that's why I was very antisocial because because I would just go work, my daughter sleep, work, my daughter sleep. No, there was no time for me to do anything.
Right.
And then it was spoke with you and Everett and other people. It's just you need, and even I spoke with the psychologist too. You need a life. You need to do your own thing. That's why I started skating, going for walks, bike, doing what I used to play video games. But I
Hmm.
still take care of my daughter. I would still take care. Even when I was away, I would just take care of my daughter financially as well too. But in the meantime, my daughter was born in 2015, and then I was anxious. Every time I was anxious and depressed, think about my daughter, everything would just go away. But in 2022, when it really got really bad, it was just that I just I also was attached to my daughter, attached to anything.
Yeah.
But in 2022, if you listen to my first conversation, in 2022, I felt detached from like the world. I
Right.
felt empty. I
Right.
felt that emptiness. And then when I felt that emptiness, to me, it was just, it was just, I don't know, it was just freaking out. It was just not normal for me. It was just, what am I doing here then? What's my purpose if I wasn't attached to anything?
Right.
And then, and I think that was the end of my. I think it was. I started to see the other side of my anxiety, the kind of like the good life, like what I'm experiencing right now.
Hmm.
When I told you about, now I'm starting to see colors. It's like I was always very anxious. My when you go for a run,
Yeah.
that was my vision of the world. I was very anxious because it was just my eyes would just get watery, and it was just my mind was just like on like I was just very anxious all the time because
Yeah.
I would not even see details about where I live, about my facial expressions, and my hands and anything. But that was my life for over 20 years. But then when I experienced this in 2022, the other side of that, when I felt detached from the world, and I felt so lonely, I was like I wasn't used to that. That's when I started freaking out because my purpose was my daughter, was being here, but when I felt that emptiness, I just didn't know what to do. I
Well, and
just didn't know what to do.
one of the addictive tendencies is to, if we feel better, we think the problem's gone, when in fact we're
Yes,
just experiencing something that we're willing to be appreciating. We're willing to appreciate. We're admitting openly we appreciate something. That feels good. Appreciation is value. It's worthwhile. So the time spent becomes much different than the time spent thinking of things that have no value and are worthless.
yeah. Can I share something with you? So
Please.
because I moved to Southern California in 2016,
Mhm.
I was we were together with my girlfriend for about a few months, and then we went our separate ways. And I was always on the move all the time, going to see my daughter work on the move until 2022 when I got I was always living in a room, renting a room, just a room. But I never liked it though. I never liked it. I was always outside, waiting in my car, being at the park, or just being outside, not being in my room.
Mhm.
But in 2022, I got my own apartment, in Santa Monica, because that was one of my goals, to be in Santa Monica, live close to my my job, which was on 7 in Wilshire.
Mhm.
And then when I reached my goal to be here, I was like, so what's next? And then I got to spend a lot of time by myself in my
Mhm.
room, in my apartment.
Mhm.
I started to rethink about what I did, what happened, and everything. But then I started to, I just couldn't get away from my thoughts anymore.
Yeah.
Because there was no. I mean, why would I be outside when I can be in my apartment? Because there was no way for me to be outside. I'm just gonna go to my apartment. Work is about a few blocks away from my apartment, and I wasn't outside anymore. I was in my room, just with me in my thoughts.
Mhm.
But that's when it got really bad.
Yeah.
And then I just couldn't get away from my thoughts. I mean, there's the one thing that I cannot get away from, just my thoughts, because and then I couldn't sleep because I was so anxious, and I started freaking out, and then I went to the ER. I actually told my daughter's mom, I mean my girlfriend right now, that I went to the ER, and she told me what's going on. I couldn't tell her. But then eventually I told her what's going on. I mean, what happened. She actually understood. She went through it too as well.
Mhm.
So I know what you're going through. You need help.
Mhm.
But I was fighting it. I didn't wanna accept it.
Well,
And then once again, I don't want to. Then once again, I I started talking to Everett, and then I went to the ER again after that. And then that's when I got introduced to you, and then I called you too. That was the second time I went to the ER,
yeah.
when I called you. Yeah.
And that was the time that you said, I'm afraid I'm going crazy.
Yes, but here's the thing. But you told me, just why don't you act crazy for a day or two, or something, right?
I said, why don't you
That's
just
what
go
you said.
crazy?
I know,
What would happen? And you started laughing.
yeah, and then after that, thinking about going crazy went away.
Yeah.
But then my mind started to look for other things that could go wrong. But it takes time, and then some people, this is very painful. It's just going through the pain. It's just a lot. I thought I was weak. I thought I was strong but weak, but then I thought I was weak again. But thinking about what I went through every time I'm in Santa Monica, and then I used to have a lot of nightmares about being in Santa Monica, in LA, but not but it was all in my head. It's nothing like it was in my head.
Right.
Everything is so peaceful.
So think, Harry, in one respect, as you began to notice that for a long period of time you thought things were fine, but there were obviously things going on that were not fine, that you were
Yes.
not paying attention to. And those things over time built up. And my sense is stress begins to undermine our bodily functions. So we start hurting physically as a manifestation of the emotional pain and the mental anguish and the inner conflict that we've been trying to pretend isn't bad and it isn't wrong and something's fine about it, when in fact it's an indication that something is wrong. To go numb to something and make believe that getting numb solves the problem is to ignore the problem, which is the root of ignorance. Certainly, that's not intelligence, right? And to notice
Yes.
that addiction basically is doing the wrong thing over and over again, thinking someday it will be right. So it's a reaction, a reaction, a reaction, a reaction, constantly fighting for the thought because the thought has no basis. So feeling empty, as you described, is natural because you're feeling the emptiness. Think of how wise it is to be able to have the experience of feeling empty, and how then crazy it is to think that you're empty and you have nothing to live for because you have
Mhm.
determined your thinking is hairy. This is something you're doing that you have determined is now you. We can't do what we are. We can only be what we are. So if who you are is the observer watching that, in another twist, the same idea of recognizing that emptiness is actually an empty thought, as you were willing to start looking more honestly at what was going on, you started witnessing the fear you'd been denying. And by the time you started witnessing it, it had built up to feel like a major explosion going on in front of you. That's a panic attack in my experience.
Yes.
And to look at it is actually an indication that you know you can see it. You know that you can actually observe it because you've been the observer the whole time, acting as though you were only the thought. So when you think about corrupt thoughts, you're thinking from corrupt thoughts and you're furthering the corruption. So when you sit alone, you feel like you're going off the end of the cliff. It gets darker and darker and darker because all you're doing is repeating, reacting, reacting. Same thing over and over again. It's going to get darker. It's like digging a hole. If you keep digging, you're going to get deeper, inevitably.
I know. Yeah, that's what I found out too. Remember when I said to you, I've been doing the same thing for over over 2 years. I mean, I think 2 years, but something needs to change. But I've been doing the same thing. Every time it was dark, I would go in my room and get darker. Think
Right.
about dark things, think about my thoughts. And then but it got to the point that I used to channel it. It just thinking about it so much. And then and then I started to see things too. It was like it was like 2 weeks of being good, and then another 2 weeks of being really bad.
Right.
But like you said, but like you said a while ago, a few weeks ago, I think months ago, because I was just preparing myself for it. Because I was thinking about when I used to come and visit to LA, I used to kind of like think ahead, like be prepared. Okay, what if I go to Santa Monica and see where I used to live before? How would I react? Okay, let's think about this. How would I react to it? But I would just think about that thing, that to the point that when I show up when I used to come to Santa Monica, be at that place, none of it would happen.
Right.
None of it would happen. It would just my overthinking would just killing me.
Right.
But it was just me the whole time.
All compulsions, and obsessive thinking is a compulsion because we're acting it out. It's not just happening in our brain, it's happening in the actions we take, which become compulsions. So the whole cycle is combined, it's not separate. We can't do it in our mind and not have compulsive actions. And part of the compulsive actions, because actions typically we think of them as outside, things we do with our hands and our feet, and we move things around, those are actions out in the world around us. But in fact, thoughts are actions because we're choosing how we're going to think. We're choosing what we're thinking. We're not choosing that we're thinking. That's natural, just like our body breathes naturally. We choose whether we're going to breathe deeply or not. But our body, if I don't breathe, I'm going to pass out and my body's going to start breathing. I won't even be conscious at that point in terms of my awareness, my mental awareness, but my body will naturally do what it's naturally designed to do. So those compulsions are all suicidal tendencies, every one of them, everything we are compulsively acting on.
I know it took me a while to actually be honest to myself, like when I text you, it's like I couldn't believe it that I was thinking about that. So when I actually became honest, I started crying. This is what happened. This is what happened. This is what's happening to me. I started crying, but it's like that. It's like I was. It's like losing 20, 40 pounds. I felt so light.
Right.
It was just I was denying the whole time.
So think of that weight, Harry, as what's depressing. We're witnessing this sense of things that matter. They matter so much that they're all we're thinking about. And matter in the universe has weight and takes space. So it causes shadows and it takes effort to move around. If you feel that 40 pounds and you're literally describing it, that weight on you is what is depressing. We've literally created a weight that doesn't exist, but it feels like it exists, just like we're in a dream and somebody hands us a 40-pound rock and says, carry this the rest of your life. And we're trying to we figure the best thing we can do is put it in a backpack so we can use our hands rather than never have our hands again. But we're still burdened by the weight. There's
Yeah,
some combination that no matter what we do with it, it's still bearing down on us. And
I know. And then, yeah,
addiction is that idea that it's happening to us, to me, rather than being caused by me.
yeah, I know. And then it took me a bit to get used to the new me, because the funny thing is that the funny thing is that when I leave leave my house to go to work, I thought I forgot something. Maybe did I forget my pants? Did I forget this? Because I felt lighter. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I was always thinking, did I wear my shoes? Am I wearing a sweater or something? Yeah,
it's
that's funny. I know it.
spontaneous. Yeah,
Yes, because I feel lighter. I
yeah.
feel lighter, and it's like, did I forget something? What's going on? I looked around. I'm like, no, everything looks good. I'm wearing pants, a sweater, and everything, my shoes and everything. But that's the thing. You're right. Yeah, that was my depression. I was depressed.
So
So now that I told you, about what happened here in Santa Monica. So when I went back to Chicago, I went to see a psychiatrist. Here too, I went to see a psychiatrist, but I never took any pills. But so let me share with you what made me change. What really made me think that it was me. The issue was me, because I started taking pills. Went to see a psychologist and psychiatrist. Psychiatrist prescribed me. I think it is forgot the name, but so I forgot it. But I was taking a small amount, a small dose, and I took that for about maybe 6 months. No, 4 months. I stopped by myself without even telling my psychiatrist. I stopped seeing my psychiatrist. Finished my session with my psychologist. But then that was it. I stopped taking my medication in December 2022. So I did it on my own.
mhm.
I went through a lot of things, but I felt good. And then in February 2023, I had another, I guess you can say, another mental breakdown. And then I was like, well, this is coming back again. Maybe I should start taking more. Maybe I should go back to my medication. I went to see my psychiatrist again, to same psychiatrist in Chicago, to take my medication. So she once again prescribed me the medication. So, and then I started taking that for over about 6 months, a little over 6 months.
Mhm.
But then after 6 months, and it was coming back again, the same thing.
Mhm.
And then I was like, but in the meantime, I was thinking, I think it's me. I think it's me. But in the meantime, maybe about 6 8 months, I was like, maybe I should ask to increase my dose so I can feel better. But then I started to realize, but this is never going to stop. Then my body will get used to the higher dose, and then it's going to ask me for more and more. But then I started to realize that it was just me overthinking. It was just me. The issue was just me,
Mhm.
because I would even play games with myself. Okay, let's not. Okay, for a minute, let's not think about anything, and then it felt good.
Mhm.
Okay, and then okay, let's do another 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So that's when I started to realize that it was my thinking. Then I
Well,
spoke to my psychiatrist. I told her, I need to. I got to stop. Can we just take? I just wanted to stop, and then she helped me stop my medication, and then I had no medication ever since.
and maybe the temporary relief you gave you the perspective, a little bit more room to start to see a little easier that it was something you were doing rather than something you need to take to fix. Again, to take another chemical to fix the chemical imbalance you're creating in the thinking you're doing. And when you say, Harry, it's me, think about that. You have to believe that you are your thoughts for it to be you, rather than just start to notice it's your choices to think the way you are that are
Yes, my choice.
causing it. It's
That,
your choices.
that that's the right word. Yes,
Yeah.
that's the right word. My choice. It was my choice, because even right now when I was interviewing, because I've been interviewing. Sometimes I got really upset because things don't go that way. But I have to be honest. It just that's the way it is. I mean, either you can go this way or that way. Just being honest. Just being honest helps a lot. being honest, and just not
Yeah.
overthinking. Yes.
Well, and you talked about those points when you started feeling better and then became afraid immediately of being able to go back. The fact is, if we have free will, and it's fairly commonly assumed that we do, meaning we can choose whatever we want. We're free to choose to think whatever we want ultimately. People say, well, I can do whatever I want. And I say, well, you actually can't do whatever you want because you probably can't take a single step and end up on the moon right now. So there are some things that you're not going to be able to do, but we're free to think that we can. We can think anything we want in that regard because I can think about taking a step and being on the moon. I can think about doing things that I couldn't otherwise do. That's a possibility of thinking. So if I'm the
Mhm.
one choosing to think about my thinking as reality, and then I get stuck in thinking it's the only thing I can do, because if it's reality, my life now depends on my thinking, and it actually does, because our human capacity is determined by how well we think. But if the thinking I'm doing is sick and it's killing me, and I'm making believe doing more of it is my salvation and going to save me, that is exactly what an addiction is. This idea
Mhm.
that more of something that's wrong will become right. And it seems that no matter how much of it I do, my experience gets more and more difficult, darker, heavier, etc. And I don't
Yeah.
feel there's any hope. It's interesting. Not feeling there's any hope is interesting, as I mentioned about your ability to notice what was going on and start seeing the pain that you'd been managing and thinking it wasn't happening. You start seeing it, and it's a little striking to all of a sudden notice that you've created so much pain in your experience that you actually cry when you face it because you've been mourning the
And
vitality and the aliveness, the spontaneity and the inspiration of life while you've been condemning yourself to an experience that's completely manufactured in your thinking like a dream and isn't real, and yet you believe it is because you think your thinking is in fact your reality and thus becomes who you are. So those possibilities are always possible. So start to see that we can go to one side. Mood swings are literally, think of that 40-pound weight on the end of a string. And if you get it moving,
Mhm.
it's going to go back and forth. But think about that
Mhm.
string without any weight, and it's going to flutter and it's going to go in all kinds of directions, very lightly and very easily, without the intensity of that momentum that seems to happen to us. Again, we've created these narratives and stories around it to create the imagery to justify the insanity of the thinking. And it feels real because we're experiencing it, we're dreaming it, we're making believe our thoughts are real, and then we think it's reality. That's a bad start when in fact reality has always been real and has never been made up in a human thought. It's always been
Mhm.
transformed by human thought. It's always been expressed in human thought when humans are thinking honestly, accurately, and expressing the abundant nature of our actual instinctive nature to thrive and survive, which means we're thinking in terms of everyone rather than just me. Because when I do well, when I figure something out, when Orville and Wilbur learned how to fly, everybody all of a sudden realized they could fly, that it was
Yeah.
possible. So
Mhm. Yeah.
those
And
fears,
yeah.
those fears are induced by the ideas that haven't quite come apart yet. We're still dealing with a lot of ideas that we don't think are there. We call them subconscious. We don't think we're thinking what we're thinking. And proof of that or evidence of that is that we can be in a present situation and think that present situation shouldn't be happening while it's happening. That's a very
Mhm.
good example of exactly how we make believe that we're not thinking what we're thinking. If we can think in the moment that what's happening shouldn't be happening when it's actually all that's happening, that's a pretty
Mhm.
broad step that we can take in the direction of insanity, literally creating illusional illusions and thinking of them as reality is delusion.
Mhm. And can I ask you something? What about, so every time I was anxious, I would get very angry,
Yeah,
angry at myself,
yeah.
angry with people, angry. It just
Because
what's the
you keep relying on
yeah.
something that has no basis as though it has a real basis.
And then I
And
feel like some type of energy in my chest, like really, like it's something like wanted to like
yeah, like a
pop out,
cardiac
like get out.
arrest, like a heart
Yes.
attack. Yeah. Think of what
Yeah.
people talk about anxiety and stress, lowering your anxiety and stress to reduce disease. But we don't talk about this source that we're creating and this whole idea about who we are as being our thoughts. Gurus have talked about it, seekers have talked about it, yogis have talked about it, Maharishis have talked about it, and they say that you're not your thoughts. Zen masters
Mhm.
have talked about it through history. People have talked about this. You're not your thoughts. And you can say, oh, I know I'm not my thoughts, and still be operating on the basis that you think you're your thoughts because you're operating on a basis that you think your subconscious is something you don't have anything to do with and you don't know anything about. And it's interesting
Mhm.
that we use it as an excuse openly, but we don't notice that
Yeah.
if we're talking about it openly, we're well more aware of it, or more well aware of it than we're letting on. We're trying to create a story to justify the insanity by just creating a new narrative. I don't know what's going on. I never knew. I didn't know when I didn't know, when in fact we knew all along, which is exactly why we've been suffering. We wouldn't suffer if we really didn't know. It would have been the only thing that could have been happening. And as a result, we'd have been resigned to it because there would have been no possibility of anything else happening.
Yeah. And there was always some. There was a good sign, like a good side, a good side. I'm sorry. And every time I was happy, like during those years, every time I was happy, there was always a side of my head that was very pessimistic about.
Yeah.
Every time I would get happy, something would just pull me down.
Well, think of the
But
pendulum, Harry. Think of the pendulum going from feeling good to feeling bad. And you know that the more you feel good, it's getting higher and higher. It's going to swing back at some point.
I
And
know,
what are
and
you going
then
to feel? You're
yeah,
going to
and then
feel horrible.
yeah, and then I remember when I was dating my girlfriend right now back in 2015, before 2015. She asked me, "Are you bipolar?" Because I was hiding it at that time. I was hiding everything. All this I was hiding it, but it seems like she knew about. I mean, I think
Yeah.
she knows better about feelings and everything than me. A lot more. Like every time I speak with her, and she's like, "Yeah, I've been through that. I know." So she helps me relieve that attention because okay, she's been through it too as well too. It's not just me. It's just we all. Sometimes I just make a big deal, make a big deal out of like anything. That's just me. That's how I used to be, and it's still in me, but I'm able to deal with it now way
Yeah.
better than before.
Well, part of the issue in all that, in terms of thinking, is that when we think we're always going to feel good, any degree of bad seems horrendous because it violates the whole premise that we're in charge, that we have control, that we have absolute control. Because when we think our thinking is right and real and true, any violation of us feeling good seems to threaten that reality we have, which isn't reality at all. It's a delusion.
Hmm.
So bipolar, think about bipolar. Bi is separate, right? Polarities are extremes, opposites. Something's happening over here. There's always something opposite happening, but they're really not opposite in reality because they're connected with the opposite. They're connected with that other thing. But when they become opposites is when we take one position, I only want to feel good, and then everything that would be other than that becomes a threat and a risk to us because it completely violates the premise that we're absolutely going to always feel good. The fact is, we feel varying degrees of things all day long. Everything is changing all the time.
Yeah,
Our thoughts, our moods, all of it, all the time. If
I
we're
know. Yes.
taking positions, that's when we become afraid of other positions. When in reality, when you start seeing this accurately, when you take a position, you're going to notice that everyone and everything else is also capable of taking every other position. So now you're not opposed to anything because you're thinking about it as a unified field rather than one that is divided, a bipolarized experience where this is right and that is wrong, and I'm always going to be right because I think my life depends on it. Interesting that we would think our life depends on the thing that's killing us. Think of how sick that is in terms of thinking. It's completely twisted.
Yeah. Yeah, I was so used to I was just so used to dealing with anxiety, but I know it wasn't good.
Yeah.
But once I But I think I was depressed too as well. But what really made it really bad was just my thinking. Like I like about losing control, about
Yeah.
not having enough sleep as well too. I couldn't sleep because I was so anxious.
So think about the out of control for a second. We're afraid of being out of control, but the thing we say we're controlling is insanity. Well, there's nothing real about insanity to control, so technically we are absolutely out of control. Insanity has no control. Lies have no control.
Hmm.
There's nothing there. It's
Yeah,
literally a delusion. There is no
and then
control of it.
and then you're absolutely. And then now that I think, I mean, I thought about this before. So I've been stuck for over 2 years thinking about this. I was in the loop, and then none of it happened. It was just insane. None of it happened. None of my fears happened.
Of course.
Uh,
You know why?
no.
Because they're all imagined.
It's a what?
Imagination. They're all
Oh,
imagined.
imagination.
If
I
you're
know that.
if you're
Yes,
so afraid of your imagination as being real,
I know
imagine when you start facing reality, it's nothing like that.
I know. Yeah, that's when I started to realize too. And then so, yeah, I know. And sometimes it felt like a dream. And then when I was really depressed, and I would come out and started laughing. What? Because I started laughing because I started laughing at my own thought, my own thoughts. Because it was funny. You said, "Why would I be afraid of my thoughts?" And then eventually got better, way better. And
Yeah.
then once I got a taste of what it's like to be like this right now, because sometimes I go ups and downs, but nothing really bad. I'm able to handle everything. I'm able to see the signs. Like you talk about the lights on the dashboard or the car light dashboard. I'm
Yeah.
able to see the lights on what's going on. If you
Yeah.
go down this path, then this is what's going to happen. So I'm able to see now. To see, I'm always honest with myself as well. But once I got a taste of what it's like to be like this, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. It just being full of life. It's like it, I was afraid I was always attached to anything, and then and at some point I remember taking a walk back in Chicago, and I felt empty. It's like there's no stress. It's just I just felt light.
Yeah.
I felt light.
You
And it's
see the
just
difference in that emptiness?
yes. I mean,
That emptiness, there's no
there's no
weight in it.
worriness.
There's no
There's
weight
no
in it.
yes.
There's no fear. There's we call it empty, but it's actually filled with freedom.
Yes,
Absolute freedom.
that's when I actually got a taste of it, and then I was like, wow, this is great. And then at that time I would just be okay for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then go down the hill. And I was so when I was really dark, I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to go back 2 or 3 weeks ago to be the way I
Right.
used to be 2 weeks ago. But I was fighting it too as well.
It's
I
funny
was
that
fighting it.
we think of
Yeah,
wanting to go backward, which is impossible,
I know.
because we're denying that we're actually where we are, which is
Yeah.
always moving forward because it's always new. All the possibilities are always possible where we are.
Hmm.
So here's a thought
And
to
that,
consider, Harry, so that we
yeah.
can talk about this further. I'm going to just plant the seed. For all
Uh,
that time you thought you were afraid and you thought those things were real, that life you just, my sense is we're not afraid of dying, we're afraid of living when we're in that thinking. Because we seem
yes.
to be doing more and more, we seem to be striving for the thing that's killing us. We are having hope in an idea that's hopeless. That's a very depressing approach to our experience as humans. We're trying to do
Mhm.
something that's absolutely hopeless, and we think more hope will be enough. We think more faith in the faithlessness of the thing we're trying to do will be enough. That's how addiction works. More and more is never enough. Enough is never enough. And so you have to, finally, people just shoot themselves or try to kill themselves to stop it, thinking that that's the
Mhm.
only option. They literally kill the vehicle rather than the driver
Yeah. That's
because
why
it's the driver. It's
yeah.
insanity. So I want to
Yeah.
pose one thing for you to think about.
Hmm.
The whole time you thought you weren't there, you were there in that place of peace and life. You were just so intoxicated with your thinking that you thought you weren't. where you were. You thought you didn't belong where you were. You thought you were afraid to be where you were, and all those other thinkings, because all that other thinking, because you really thought you were the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time, the thinking was accurately telling you, doing this is fearful. Doing this is crazy. Doing this is hopeless. Doing this is faithless. It's telling you that, but what do? Because we're in that mentality, we're intoxicated and consumed. We think what we need is more hope, more confidence. We need to build more self-confidence. We need to have more confidence in the self that's literally nothing more than our thinking about itself, that we have determined is us. So now we're in the thoughts, like you described earlier. We're stuck in the thoughts. You couldn't get out of the thoughts. All you could do was think. It wasn't all you could do. It was all you were choosing to do so that you could justify the insanity of the idea that you were the creator of reality rather than a product of reality.
Mm-hmm.
So as
Yeah.
you sit with that and live with that, a lot of the stories, a lot of the stuff that you think, what I used to do was sit around and think if I could get the story right, then I could tell it in a way that everyone would understand exactly what's wrong with me so that they could understand what's right about me. And that's crazy because, first of all, I never got the story right enough to be anything other than embarrassed telling it. I was always gun shy about it. I was always rewriting it as I was telling it because I realized I hadn't written it very well because there's no way to do it well. It is not
Yeah.
well being to think insane thoughts will somehow prevail and turn into sanity and healing and health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even in Santa Monica in 2022, I was afraid of one of my biggest fears was to actually hurt myself.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be in my room because that was one of my biggest fears, to be honest.
But you were hurting
I thought
yourself at the moment. It wasn't you were going to, you were doing it.
I was doing it, yes,
And
mentally. I was doing it
see
mentally,
how
yes.
the discounted thinking is I'm afraid of doing it as though it's not happening.
Yeah.
So you start being
Yes.
afraid of it as something that might happen because
Yeah.
you're denying the fact that it is happening. So immediately we have a consequence, some other opposite effect caused by thinking twistedly. It's not happening. I don't have anything to do with it. So I all of a sudden become afraid of doing something really drastic. But I'm not noticing I'm already doing something really drastic, which is to entertain ideas as though they're real and think that my job is to manage them. To engage with insanity is insane. It's never going to help.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to work. But we're free to do it. And to begin to see that is begin to see that that peril you felt was the idea that you were only going to do one thing, and that was be sane and happy and never do that other thing again. Rather than say, no, I am absolutely free to do it. But now that I see it in a balanced form, I don't have any need or interest in re-choosing to do that, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And yet circumstances sometimes occur where I feel caught off guard, which tells me that I'm always on guard to some degree. What am I protecting if I don't have thoughts that are all true? If I'm honest in every way, I wouldn't have that sense because I wouldn't be protecting anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. Yeah. And I think a while ago I shared something with you too about when while I was going through this, I would just wake up with songs playing. I mean, with songs playing in my head,
Yeah,
and then one song would just play in my head and be like, okay, this song doesn't bother me anymore. Because I would always attach songs to places. I would attach anything to something. So I
yeah,
would attach. And then I would just wake up and a song would just start playing in my head, and then I was like, oh, this doesn't bother me. And then another song would come up, and then no, nothing. And then another. It would just go on until something would just freak me out.
that
That I would just.
attachment is addiction. That the idea that we need to attach to things comes from the idea that we're detached from everything. When I think I'm the creator of reality, I think I am no longer in reality. That means I'm detached from reality. Not only that, everywhere I look to go to finally be happy, I never find happiness. I never seem to belong wherever I go. because I'm carrying with me the idea that I'm the creator of reality.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever I go, which I would say what's happening would be as close to reality as we get in terms of the physical experience. So what's happening is at least something that's always stable. You can see the absolute nature in it. What's happening is always happening. It's always happening wherever we each are. It's always present. And it's always everything, not some things happening and other things not happening. Everything that's happening is happening simultaneously, including people having thoughts about things that aren't happening. So it's all simultaneous. It's all now. It's all happening as it is happening right this very second or moment. It's not even divisible in a time frame. And my sense is it is actually the present nature of the absolute presence. That means all possibility that's possible is possible. And the question is, if I'm thinking honestly about my experience, why do I not express that as often? And I can see that it's because I'm not relying on it in absolute terms. I'm thinking of it in how I think about it rather than how it actually is. So that gives me some learning to do, some growth to do, some talking to do, some expression to do, some sharing to do, to exercise and say, wow, yeah, I must be thinking a lot of things to think that everything isn't always happening and that everything isn't always possible, so that everything I might want to do that can be done would be happening, rather than wondering why I'm not doing the things I think I should be doing.
Yeah.
So there's an honesty in the effects that we're creating, in the hopelessness, in the mourning, in the grieving, in the sense of loss, in the sense of disconnection. All that kind of stuff is natural for the position we've taken in relation to reality and truth and life and love and all of those essential characteristics of existence. It's very, very simple. Because nothing's missing in the universe, nothing's missing in our experience. So again, going back to your point, when you thought you weren't seeing those things, I'm going to suggest that your way of seeing them during those times was all of the difficulties you were facing and all of the fear you were experiencing and all of the disconnects that you have and all the loneliness and all the momentary ideas you had about spending time alone. You were trying to mimic what you were doing in your thinking by acting on it as though it would help. And what happened is you
Yeah.
got worse because you were nursing like you were being breastfed off of a poison breast. You were eating a toxic form of waste. And it's only going to get worse. Nothing's going to get better when you do that. If the seed is corrupt, the tree is not going to be healthy.
Yeah. When I came back, when I went back to Chicago, my brothers told me, you never talked to us about anything, so we thought you were okay. But every time I felt really anxious or bad, every once in a while I would talk to them. Even my youngest brother seems to understand more because he went through it too as well too. He went through anxiety and depression. He told me to. He never told us to, but once I opened up, he opened up to as well. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about what happened to him as well. But I started. The thing is that I was so like as I said before, I was always a lonely person. I didn't want to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
But now it's just you should see me. I even go to the store and start talking to people. How are you? It's like it's just different. It's just it's like I want to feel connected to people. I want to feel like
You are.
it just it yes. And then even going through I mentioned this before. Even in 2022, I didn't want to be in my room. I wanted to be surrounded by people. That's why I used to go to Santa Monica Pier and but I wouldn't talk to anyone. But I just wanted to be surrounded by people. But then eventually, once I got better, I started to talking to people. Just talking to my brothers, my parents, girlfriend, my daughter. It just I mean, I just wanted to feel connected to people, and it seems like I was never alone. It was just me feeling lonely.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, it feels amazing. It was really tough, to be honest, and I thought I couldn't get out. At some point, I was like, at some point, you know what I said to myself in my room back in Chicago is like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to do anything to myself. I'm gonna have to live like this. And then things started to get better. It just I just wanted to be with my family.
They'll eventually wish you'd stop talking.
Mhm.
I said they'll eventually wish you stop talking.
I know. I was just crying a little bit.
I'm kidding, but it's funny when you're not talking to
I know.
anybody, they wonder why, and when you start, they wonder why.
I know. Yeah. But it was really tough to be honest. It was really tough.
Yeah.
But there's always hope. It's just once I started to see the things that I was doing wrong, one I gave myself credit every week. I was down the hill for a week, and then the following 2 weeks, I was like, oh, this is not as bad as 2 weeks ago. I think I'm doing something right. Just giving myself credit, uh, taking care of myself. I know when I get anxious. I know what's about to happen. I get stressed out, anxious, depression, and then boom, everything explodes. And then I'm like that for about 2 or 3 days, 4 days,
Yeah.
and then, but that doesn't happen anymore. But it used to happen. But
It will though. If you're
I know.
growing, you're
Yeah.
going to face the limits of thoughts that you are starting to extend beyond. And when you go beyond the horizon and you think the world is flat, it seems like doom, just like people who were sailors thought that the horizon meant the end of the
Yes.
world, and yet you can never get there. But when you're in
Yes.
your limited thoughts and you think they're true, those challenges are the opportunity to begin to grow, to begin to give up the fight of maintaining the limits. Because
Hmm.
if you can simply admit, you don't have to know why you're doing it to know that you're doing it. Because why, what, when, where, and how, those are all questions that are coming from doubt. If I'm looking for the answer why, I'm just going to come up with more reasons to have more doubt. The answer is
Hmm.
never ultimately the answer because the fact that it's happening is the answer. That's enough. If it's happening,
Hmm.
it's happening. If you turn to your own awareness and say, this is happening, that it is happening is not a question, it's a statement of confidence. It's happening. And if it's happening, what I know, I caused it. I don't have to know how
Yeah.
or why to know that I caused it. So again, I'm in that rather than what and why and where and how and when. If I caused
Yeah.
it and start living with that, I'm going to start seeing a whole series of circumstances and times and historic events and ideas and relationships and all kinds of things that I've been involved in that have had this thread running through it, coming from whatever it was that thought was. I never have to find the thought. There's no past to go back to find it. It's all happening in the present because nothing that isn't happening is happening in the present except thoughts about things that aren't happening in the present. Everything we think about always happens in the present because everything that's happening is always happening in the present.
Mhm. And one thing I think I shared this with you too. Once it got better, I got really upset at myself because I wasted so many years of my life.
Yeah.
Things could I could have done things differently. It just
But what's
it
interesting,
just
Harry, again,
yes.
you couldn't have done things differently because that's the way you did them. And those things in the past that we think we can renegotiate is still part of that same thinking that we can renegotiate the terms of reality by making believe
Mhm.
more belief in our thinking and more hope in our thinking and more faith in our thinking is going to finally turn our thinking into reality. And people say
Yes.
that. That's my reality, people. And I say, how is that possible if it's not everyone's? How would reality be
Yeah.
yours and not everybody else's? Yes, we can come to conclusions. We can make decisions. We can
Mhm.
think of things the way we choose to think of them. But again, in doing that, like I said earlier about taking positions, if I can freely take a position and I'm honest about it, I can freely recognize everyone else is free to take any position they want, including a position that would be polar opposite of mine. But when
Mhm.
I'm the one taking the position and then taking the polar opposite position, fighting, saying, I don't want to be here, I only want to be here, I'm driving myself literally crazy because it makes no sense to be the thesis and the antithesis of it at the same time, the master and the slave. And we cause that in
Yeah.
our experience. to begin to see that, you're going to begin to look at the world and start to see problems that are out there that are actual problems that can be disturbing and are discomforting and are sad. And you'll see that that sadness you used to think was reserved for your own self all of a sudden becomes your actual awareness of compassion for others and the inspiration you have to
Yeah.
share with others and help others and be an instrument of peace and growth, rather than this
Mhm.
idea that reactiveness is the only thing we can do and the fight is the only thing we can do. It's not to say we won't be in fights, because my sense is we're designed to protect ourselves. Those
Yeah.
instincts we have, when used properly, will fight, flight, freeze, fawn, whatever. We're going to do those things. That's going to happen naturally. We're built
Mm.
for that because our organism is designed to survive, like every organism is designed to survive, including sick cancers, etc. They all seem to have their
Mhm.
impulse to want to get better. That's a good description of what this mental problem is. We create this cancerous organism and then want to replicate it to make believe that getting it bigger and bigger is going to prove that we're actually in charge of reality, when in fact it drives us crazy and kills us. Our bodies suffer from that because they're not designed to process insanity.
Yeah. But I actually made a big improvement. I was in this loop for about 2 years from June. No, I was in, when did it happen? Yeah, I think June. Yeah, June 2022,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to June 2024. But when I started to see change was from June 2024 until now. Big change, because I started to notice things.
Yeah.
I started to being honest. But so it's just, but you see the difference. 2 years without no improvement, and then
Well,
it. Listen, I mean, I think there might have been improvement, but when I started to see a lot, when I started to see a lot more like improvement was the after June 2024 until now.
so, to that point, and what I was just saying about the past not being there to even deal with, we can spend the rest of our time wishing we'd done it different, but we're never going to regret what we didn't do in the past. We're going to regret having spent the present thinking about things that
Yeah,
we can't do anything about all over again. So, it's
yeah,
crazy.
it is
So,
crazy. Yeah, you're right.
the other
You
thing,
just made me
Harry,
laugh.
good. It's a relief. It's crying and laughing are sort of reliefs of tension. The, uh,
Yeah.
the other thing that's interesting about that is that since you're starting to recognize nature as your nature, the information in that nature is all information. It's called intuition, knowledge beyond reason. There's no reason or understanding in it. There's no logic in it. It's just you know you know. That means that all those things you did you thought you could have done different are exactly what led you to the point at which you begin to see that you actually have great command over everything. And now the question is, how well are you going to apply that in the world around you and with those around you?
Mhm.
That's the question. If you're at that point, you're describing it. You were just describing it took 2 years, but it seems like, look at how in 20 years I couldn't do anything. In 2 years, I seem to have done everything because you're aligned with a knowing nature. I'm going to suggest again, like I did 10 minutes ago or so, you were never not aligned with that. You were always aligned with it. And all of the suffering was a condition caused by the body saying something's wrong with what you're doing. And we've become so
Mhm.
desensitized to thinking that we're trying to get over and feel better than things are actually feeling, we're not taking advantage of the opportunity to say, hey, this is really good information I'm getting. I feel wrong because I'm thinking something that's wrong. I have some belief system, some value, some cultural idea, some norm that I think is norm that is abnormal. And just, you don't have to get any more descriptive than just to know you're doing it. I know that I'm doing it. Whatever it is, I know I'm doing, I'm responsible for it. And in being response able, there's no reactivity at all. It's just literally being able to notice this is value, this is life's terms being taught in a class that I've decided to take now, rather than one I'm in and pretend I don't want anything to do with. It's really the growth and the wisdom and the insight that starts to come. Inspiration becomes the basis of thinking rather than desperation.
Yes, I try not to ignore the signs. When I
Yeah.
get anxious or anything. Yeah, when I get really like a little heavy. Even right now, when I'm describing what I went through,
Yeah.
it gives me a little bit of heaviness, just a little bit, not a lot, just a
But
little bit of
think of that, Harry.
ten- tension
You're
in behind my neck.
even describing it manifests that tension. Just describing it is something that happened because you're describing it now and it's happening. It isn't happening the way it was when you were fully engulfed in the flames or thought that you were. You're describing it with
Hmm.
perspective. So it's just a proportion of that tension that you're feeling. But you can feel the
Yes,
tension from it.
yes, I can feel.
That is a manifestation. That's what thoughts do. They manifest effects. They don't create reality. They transform existing reality. And transformation can be very disintegrative, meaning it disintegrates and ruins and destroys and corrupts things that could otherwise be useful. It can go both directions. Our choices determine the direction we go.
Yeah, but now it just life is great.
Yeah,
It just, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's great. It's great to be just being full of life. It's not perfect.
it's actually
I have,
perfect. It's
yeah, it's
actually
like,
perfect because it can't be
it's,
anything other than it is. So
yes, okay,
if you compare something to itself, even if it's seen as being imperfect, if you compare it to itself, it's perfect because it doesn't have any more or less of anything. It's
all
identical,
right.
right? So there's a thing
Mm.
in physics that say that two identical things can't occupy the same space at the same time, which in reverse
Yes,
means that wherever there's space, that means two identical things are occupying that space. So they can't.
yes,
So
you're right.
there's nothing but space
There's,
because the matter of it, the weight of it, the occupational capacity of it, the occupational hazard goes away because it disintegrates. It literally evaporates because ultimately that's the nature of nature: is that freedom, that emptiness, that void, that essence of room. There isn't dimension in that. There isn't. Stephen Hawking said that everyone in an infinite universe is at the center. There's no edges. So everyone is,
yes,
if everyone was self centered, then nobody would be self centered because everybody would be self centered. It would be that whole idea of being self centered and selfish wouldn't be a problem because we'd just say, oh, we're all that way. It's not me against them, it's me with them, it's us together. It becomes the
yeah,
same thing rather than a differentiated thing. So there's a lot in this that becomes crystal clear, but being aware of what's wrong is very healthy. It's really how our
I,
body, it's why our bodies have instincts to survive and thrive because there's
yeah, that's,
plenty of wrong that can go wrong during our existence, during our time on this planet or wherever we decide to spend it.
yeah. And then, and then those suicidal thoughts, I actually created those thoughts back in,
Yeah.
even in Santa Monica. I remember those thoughts. I remember I got through them. I remember when it happened too. I was actually on the Ocean Avenue, California, because I created it, and
You
then
want
it never stopped. I
the
created
sick,
those suicidal thoughts.
the sick part of those thoughts is that we have so much belief in a self that doesn't exist that we believe we have to kill it. Think of that. We're
Yes,
trying to kill a self that doesn't exist. That doesn't make any sense. We have
I
to
know, but
believe it's real
yeah,
to think that's something we need to do.
at that time I feel so much pain that I didn't want to.
Yeah,
It was so hard for me to deal with,
yeah.
and then it just. But I never. I was just afraid of it, afraid of those thoughts. But I needed to come to terms with them.
Yep.
But as I mentioned, I mean, I have my ups and downs. I learned how to live with them, and then but it just life. It is different now. It's different. I feel like I want to speak with people, even say hi. Even it just sometimes I just don't know myself. Just. I mean, I just wanna feel connected to people. I just wanna talk to people, and just I mean, just being friendly.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different. It's just way different, And then I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful that I guess I always thank you as well to Everett, my brothers and family, to my girlfriend, my daughter. It just, I mean, I went through a lot, but thank God it just
It
I knew I came back.
it's a team effort, Harry. You never left. You literally were living. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You know,
You're
the
right.
guys,
It's team effort. Yes.
the guy that seems so big and powerful is just a small guy behind a big curtain. And the coming to terms with that and start thinking in absolute terms and start noticing that if what's absolute is absolute, that means there's absolutely no exceptions. There's no options. There's no negotiations. It's just an absolute state of being. That's our Nate. That's the viewer of what we're doing. That's the one that's so clearly right that we as humans can recognize what's wrong. That's the basis of knowing that we can get better, and that's the basis of knowing that we are better regardless of what we're thinking. You can begin to see, well, I'm struggling with this, and yes, I'm struggling with it, but it's a choice I'm making that's causing the struggle. It's not reality, it's not truth, it's a choice I'm making. And it
Yeah,
doesn't
you can.
mean you have to give up
Mm-hmm.
the choice. But when you have the choice as a choice, it's a lot different than thinking it's the only thing you can do, which is an addictive thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gave me an advice. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago that you told me if you struggle with something, just share it with someone. You know, this is I
Mm-hmm.
struggle with this, and that helped too a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I actually spoke that I actually spoke about that with my girlfriend and my brothers too, and then it seems like it seems like that heaviness goes away. That
Well,
like
you
this
dilute the
awareness
idea
goes away.
of it's the only place it seems real is in your brain. As soon
Yes,
as
I
you
know.
start talking about it, if it's silly, you start laughing. If you write
I
about
know.
it, it starts to make no sense because you're
Yeah,
creating perspective. And perception,
yeah,
when it's thought to be true and real rather than just perceived,
I know.
seems like everything.
Yeah,
But that's just a
can I say
choice to
something?
believe in it that way.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
Yeah.
So I played a song for my brothers, and I told them, "What do you feel?" And they don't feel what I feel. I said, "It's just a song." But to me, it has a lot of pain, emotions. But for them, it's just a song. It's just
You
a song
are,
because
yeah, and you're witnessing it from your perspective, which you have the absolute right to do. So too does everyone else. In the
yes.
addictive thinking, when people used to feel different than I did, I thought of something wrong with them
I
rather
see.
than seeing the wrong I was doing to make believe that my feelings were the only ones that people should be having because I thought my thoughts were the only ones people should be having. Because I thought they were true and real, I thought my job on earth was convincing and demanding everyone think the way I do, and as a result, feel the way I do.
Mhm.
And people plead often for people to understand them while it's their own misunderstanding they're struggling with to even need anyone else to understand them. You care a lot less about how people understand you when you're not thinking your thoughts are real. You just think they're thoughts. You don't even understand some of the thoughts you have. Say, oh yeah, well that doesn't make any sense. That does at least you understand that much to be able to admit some of the stuff that goes through our heads doesn't have a lot of credence, a lot of credibility. They're just thoughts.
Mhm.
We can imagine all sorts of things. We can imagine all sorts of wrong things and not be condemned to make believe they're the only thing we can do by thinking we need to fight for them and fight. The wrong thoughts, once thought real, become the problem, not the wrong thoughts. A wrong thought, you just say, "Oh, I'm no longer going to hit my thumb with the hammer. I'm going to try to hit the nail."
Could
You
you
know,
could you repeat that? Could you repeat that? You said something. Could you go back like 5 seconds ago? The
well, you
wrong
can
thinking about.
you can always re-listen to this, but I think
Yes.
where
Oh,
I
yes. Yes.
was I can have wrong thoughts and let them go as quickly as I have them when I'm thinking is thinking. But when I think my
Hmm.
thinking is real, I think I have to make them right rather than see it's not the wrong thought I'm making right. It's just a new thought I'm thinking that's right. Because I'm always
Hmm.
if I'm rethinking a wrong thought over and over and over again, I'm newly rethinking it because everything is always new. That's the addiction. Thinking that I need to, that's the obsession too. Think of how much thinking I have to do to try to get something that's wrong to become right, rather than when I see it honestly and I say, well, that's wrong. I can do it this way. The new thought isn't coming from the old thought. It may be coming from experience and learning from the old thought, but I'm rethinking it now because I've been thinking wrong all the time was right. I just kept repeating the same thought, which is what reactiveness is. And reactiveness, impulsiveness, and compulsion all work together. It's mental reactivity causing the uneasiness in our body, impulsiveness causing the activity that we think is good, we're going to escape into, compulsion. Why would we want to escape if we were comfortable?
Yeah.
We're trying to ignore the difficulty of the discomfort. And the difficulty isn't even the discomfort, because if you have a wrong thought and feel uncomfortable and know that it's a thought, you can leave it as quickly as you have it. It's gone. It's only when I think it's right and real that I start to struggle. And I think that was the point I made.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I can think that. And what happens in time, like you're discussing, is I can think that it's wrong, or I can know that it's wrong. I can think that it's right, and I can think that it's real. And I can immediately undo that by saying, oh, here I go. Here I seem like it's unconscious, but I start noticing that I'm very aware of what's happening, because my awareness is the I in the sentence, I am thinking about myself. The I is the I am aware. I know. That's the me. That's the you. That's the us. That's the essence. This self we talk about is the thinking about itself. That isn't who I am. It's never going to be who I am. And I hear people use it in sentences as though they'll say things like, I, myself, personally, as though they're introducing different aspects of a characteristic that they're developing as being who they are, rather than just saying, I am learning. People say, I am learning myself. I am going to school myself. I went there myself. I went there is sufficient. But we tack on this idea of this self that we're constantly catering to and evolving and developing and thinking someday it's going to be, if I tell the story long enough and hard enough and people believe it, it'll become true.
Mm-hmm.
So Buddha talked about attachment, and he said that attachment, he talked about desire being the source of suffering, but he was really talking about attachment being the source, because it was the idea that if I wanted something, to try to fulfill the lack that I'm creating by making believe my thinking is reality, I'm going to attach to it many other things, thinking I'm going to be saved from the drowning I'm doing in the thoughts that I'm having. I'm attaching to think because I'm gonna attach to it. And for a minute it feels better because it feels like I pulled myself out within the thinking. But that circular, I'm still in the water. I'm still suffering. I'm still not safe. I'm wearing a life preserver, but I know it's not going to last forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sit with it. We'll probably have a discussion on Sunday. And
All right.
now I think there's 2 or 3 of these that I've done. I did one with Paul, Evan, now you. I'm going to probably do one with Gabe. Then if you listen and then we talk together, it may help everyone start to notice the common nature that we can share in the discussion, to broaden the discussion, the scope of the discussion, and start to engage in the basis of what we all share, rather than the ideas we all have that are individuals, things we're struggling with. Because when we share the ideas that we share openly, many of the struggles, if not all of the struggles, will start to dissipate and disappear, because they're all just illusory. They're all just make believe versus reality, which we can talk about openly as being the thing that we share, rather than the thing that represents the each and every one of us separately. Those self-centered seeming ideas. And it's really thought-centeredness. It's not self-centeredness at all. It's just thought thinking about itself. And what's going to happen with thought thinking about itself? More thought. It's not creating me and it's not proving me. It's just creating more thought. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
love you, brother. Thanks for the time
Love you,
today.
Jack. No, thank you. Thank you. I'll
Thanks for
see
the
you
time.
Sunday.
All right, man.
You're
See you.
welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.